Hello again and welcome to the fourth episode of There Be Game. Sticking with fantasy, what I'd like to do is talk briefly about racial psychologies and how they approach things. Now, if you're not a fan of elves or dwarves, probably stop watching now because I'm going to focus on them as they are quite obviously the long-lived and so would face the greatest difference to normal thinking or anybody that can't see the other side of 200. If you do like them, keep watching and hopefully I can give you a few ideas or two for running your character. Now, what I'd like to do is mainly talk about the fact that these people live a very long time. They say the average is 700 years, but let's be honest, it's probably more like up to 1200 for elves and up to 600-700 for dwarves, assuming with magic and a good diet they're able to stay healthy for exceedingly long periods of time and avoid cancers. Now, what this left me with was a pretty serious problem, as people were looking at my character when I said she was young and they were dropping figures that were less than a century, and I'm going, no, she's 270. She considers herself young. Why? She's only been in her job for her equivalent of 8-10 years. She's got another 400 odd ahead of her at a minimum, assuming she survives. So, yes, she considers herself young at 270. And that left them confused, and I explained it. She stayed with her mother until she was about 50. She then went to live with her father, mucked around in a few things for 20 odd years, bit of blacksmithing, bit of writing, a bit of study, never really settled down until she hit about 70. Because of her family's status and martial tradition, she decided to become a knight of Luna, in this case a paladin. So she becomes a squire at age 70, and she spends a good 30 to 40 years as a squire and training to be a knight of Luna. I don't have a problem with that. Well, for one, I suggested it, and the other, I don't have a problem with that being applied to a whole race. Why? You live to see 780, let's say. What's the problem with spending 40 years in training? I'm waiting. There isn't really a problem in spending 50 years in training or even 100 years in training because they have the time. The time here is on such a scale that a lot of people forget that when you live that long, you really can master a craft. You can really master in your basic training. We get maybe 80 years if we're lucky. 90 even if you're especially lucky. So for us, spending 40 years in training just doesn't make sense. We need to compress, condense. We need to give people the basics and put them out there. For these people, a decade is getting their head around the fundamentals, just the fundamentals, and maybe starting to teach some advanced professional level work in the case of blacksmithing. You can't change the fact that time is so much longer for them that when they go out into the world, they are producing potentially master level pieces, and they've only been, at least amongst their own, recognised as journeymen or just completing their apprenticeship. That's what I'd like to see people thinking about when they actually say, my character's an elf and she's fresh. Or he. To me, that's saying, maybe has broken a century, has learnt a few bits and pieces, has actually just left home for the first time type of thing. Whereas they're trying to pitch that to me in their characters on the closer to 300 side. I'm finding that's a little thin. It's very difficult to get right, and I highly recommend the edition of Dragon, which is focused on the elves, because it has made me think a lot about the long-lived races. So again, when you have the time to think about it, Give them the time that they believe they need to do things, to learn things, to explore. There's nothing wrong with taking 10 years, 15 years to find out what they want to do. In fact, there's nothing wrong with them taking 100 years to do it, because they're still going to enjoy it for 3 centuries. If you can put that into your character and you can sell it to your DM, that's great, and hopefully your game will be a little better for it, even if only for you. Now, for a closing note, what I'd like to say is that if you look at a movie like Star Trek First Contact, this highlights this perfectly. When Anij is talking to Picard about the blankets or the tapestries, whatever they may be, this is another thing which has inspired this thought of mine. So if you watch that and you just listen to how the Baku actually thought about things, it's the same thing again. Might not be the same setting, certainly not by a long shot, but it is certainly the same principle. Thank you again, and I hope to see you in another video.